What is up, guys? Thanks for watching as always. Today we're doing a bit more of an informative video on how to balance out stick baits. We've had two videos before on this particular topic, and I have had some requests to continue it on because some people still are getting in a little bit of trouble, so I guess we'll go from here. I actually recently received a stick bait from one of the people that I know through stickbait making, and he had a bit of trouble. He's recently started trying to make his own stick baits, and he said he made a really nice stick bait, but it didn't swim very well and it would spin on the top, so it wasn't balanced out properly, and he kind of was lost for where he had to go from there. So he actually sent me his stick bait in from Australia. He said that if I could make an instructional video on this particular stick bait, that I could keep it. I'm tempted to send it back though, because it was too kind of him to actually go through the effort of sending it to me. But it's a great example of how to balance out a stick bait, because I've actually been able to turn the stick bait that he sent me into this stick bait right here. It swims great, great action, quite big, but I think I might send it back to him. Either way, we'll start from scratch. You'll see where we started off with. At this point, I balanced the stick bait in the pool to see what the main problem was. It wasn't centered properly. There was something off. We'll go from here. So enjoy the video, guys. Alrighty, guys. So before we completely stripped the lure of the internal wiring and weighting, we decided to have a look if we could balance it out without actually taking all of it out. So this is what we started off with. Here the stick bait is completely stripped of the epoxy, some of the paint and the foil. Here you see the eventual result. This is what we're working towards. Very well balanced stick bait, nice wiggling action to it, and sits tail down in the water as well. So when we took the epoxy off, I immediately noticed that the head wasn't symmetrical. Actually, most of the back wasn't symmetrical. It was a bit more bulky on one side than it was on the other, which obviously creates a more buoyant section on one side than on the other. That will prevent the lure from sitting straight in the water. This was the main problem with this stick bait. There's a couple other things that we had to adjust, but it's got us a good start off. So here you see me reduce the wood on one side of the stick bait. You'll have to have a bit of a keen eye for this type of stuff. You have to really take your time. You can't take off too much wood, obviously. One thing you'll have to remember is that you're also reducing the buoyancy, and you just want to make it as symmetrical as possible. So take your time, have a good look. This is just one of those things that you really can't rush. So here I'm sanding off the section that we just reduced, and I'm kind of going from there. Now there's a couple of other things that needed some adjusting. After we sanded the reduced spot, we evened out some sections as well. These were not very even. One side of the left flank was a bit thicker than on the right side, and so we slightly reduced that as well. There was some filling material that the builder had used that was not reduced properly to the extent that it was a smooth transition from belly to tail, and all these type of things can really have an impact on how your lure swims. Obviously it is pretty good to have some filling material excessive to what you need, simply because it actually makes sure that it fixes all the gaps and it prevents any leaks from happening, but it is important to sand it down. So that's what you see me do here. The weighting seemed to be placed pretty well, but that's something we kind of had to wait and see. Now there was a couple of holes in the top of his head. I think these were just accidental, and these hadn't been filled up. Now if you've got a good epoxy and a good base paint coat, then you shouldn't be worried about it too much, but obviously over time these leaks could start occurring on top of his head, and that will completely ruin your lure, render it completely useless. So that was also another thing that we had to fix up. Obviously GT fishing, or tuna fishing for that matter, any situation in which you use big stick baits is not a gentle form of fishing. Your tackle really gets to endure a lot of violent moment, so making sure that it's as durable as possible is key. So here you see me just even out the filler. The filler that we use is just, as usual, super glue and sawdust. And here we're making sure that all the potential gaps are filled up, preventing any water from getting into the wood. It's starting to look a little bit better, even though that little bit of paint left makes it look horrendous, but either way. The builder did carve a bit of a face in there, but the face carving wasn't symmetrical either. They had to even it out. If you have a hard time carving a face symmetrically, you're better off just not doing it, I guess. It really is not necessary to make a lure good. It makes it look good, but that's something completely different than makes it swim good. And you should really prioritize balancing a lure properly, making it swim properly, over how it eventually looks. So either way, I have decided to continue the face carving, but I was supposed to equal it out a little bit better, make it more symmetrical. And yeah, at the end of the day, you are taking some wood off from both sides, and if you don't do it in the same fashion as on both sides, then you're going to be missing out a fair bit of wood. So either way, here's the finished product. Here's the reduced area. Obviously the flanks have been adjusted as well. You can see some adjustments there. That tail section has been reduced. It's all been sanded down to the extent that it's nice and smooth. And pretty sure it's ready for a base coat here. There we go. So that's the first base coat. Now this always allows us to check for anything that we might have missed. Now one thing I noticed was that the belly hook hanger wasn't straight. So even it was only off by probably about a millimeter, it's worth adjusting, because that means that your belly hook is not going to hang straight under the lure, and it will automatically make it not sit straight in the water either. I'm just using a little piece of metal to adjust it here, double checking it. We'll say the builder did a pretty good job at fixing this wire in. If he did a poor job, the wood would probably split apart, but it's looking pretty good now. There we go. This time the hook will hang straight under the belly, and it'll actually aid in the balancing of the lure. So now we can actually do the usual process of what we usually do with building stick baits, which is the foiling, the painting, and the epoxying. We can now just pretend that it's a fully functioning stick bait. We have just quickly tested it in the pool, and it balanced out well, so that's why the reason why we continue to build it further and finish up the lure. As per usual, I'm a sucker for foiling lures. I love the finish on it. It is time consuming, but I don't mind that at all. If you want to have a bit more of an in-depth view on how I foil my lures, feel free to obviously check out the other videos. They go a bit more in-depth into doing so. It's a pretty straightforward process. This is a semi-diamond cut. I cut one lateral line, then I make a couple of cuts towards the lateral line, and then I actually do a diamond cut above the lateral line. I don't know, it's just one of the things that looks good. Obviously, be as creative with foiling as you can be, whatever you prefer. But this is something that looks-wise has always worked for me. So here you can actually see how slow the process is. This is real-time footage, nothing sped up, and here it's sped up about 500%, I believe. So yeah, it can take quite some time. And just like with balancing a stick bait, it's one of those things that you have to take your time for, otherwise it's just not going to work out in your favor. Either way, here's one of the sides finished up. We've doubled it over so that we can cut the outline of the shape of the foil, and that way we've got two exact same pieces. They weigh the exact same, and then we can place them in the same fashion as well. Everything in favor for the balance of the lure. So here we measure out how much we need, where we have to go to make the cuts, etc. Again, take your time for this. You don't want to mess it up at this stage, especially since you probably spend about an hour cutting the scales out into the foil. I like to start from the tail. For some reason, it just makes it easier for me to fix the foil onto the body, and yeah, really helps out. What I usually do is I just stick the tip of the foil onto the tail, and then I pull the foil tight towards the body in the direction it has to go, so that it sticks in on the right way. So here we've got the finished product of the foiling. We foiled the head as well, as you can see, and now we're going to have to use a bit more spray paint to make the foil fade into the belly and the back. Here we sprayed some more base coat over the top of the foil. That fades in quite nicely. And next step is to use some silver metallic spray paint to make the foil fade into the belly. So what we've done here, we've also sprayed some blue paint over the top. Funny thing is, I actually wanted a bit of a spotty effect, and I had one of the spray paint caps didn't work very well anymore, but it was a perfect tool for making a bit of a spotted effect on the back of the lure. So paint job pretty much all done. Here we're just fixing the eyes in. Good old super glue does the trick every time. There we go. Usually the moment where you put the eyes on a stick bait, or any lure for that matter, is when that lure really comes to life. That's looking good. Now obviously time for the other side as well. There we have it. Double side done. And she's ready for the epoxy coat. This lure almost did not fit into my lure dryer, but we made it happen. Anyway, that's the first epoxy coat. Now the trick is, the silver spray paint usually doesn't cover the foil outlining, so once you're done with the first coat, you actually can use another spray paint coat on the bottom. This will really fade the foil into the belly. What we use here is just some masking tape, simply because we don't want a lot of spray paint on the side. We just want it on the belly. So we want to make sure that foil is visible on the side, but it kind of fades into the belly obviously. So that masking tape helps a lot with that. Make sure everything is tight so nothing seeps through. And we're pretty much good to go. There you go. That's the silver belly. Transitions nicely into the foil. Perfect. Time for a pool test. Now, we still have a bit of a problem with rainwater in the pool at the moment, so I can't really show you the action underwater very well. It's only the last bit and the first bit of the cast that I make into the pool. It really is not very helpful, but I've tried my best. There should be some contrasted footage somewhere around as well. Here you see the lure swim away. It all goes a little bit quick, so you might not actually be able to see how it actually swims. Here's the contrasted footage. Here you see it wiggle off. This is actually on a straight retrieve, so it's got a really nice wiggle to it. Sits well in the water, tail down, head just popping out the water on the paws. Makes a nice splash too. You see that nice wiggle. Perfect. Comes heads up. One more cast. Perfect. Love it. Very nice little wiggle. Awesome. Well, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and again, if you have any questions, please let us know. Cheers.